Jake Morrison pulled hard on the control stick, but his ship would not listen. Black smoke filled the cockpit as red warning lights flashed all around him. The small reconnaissance vessel shook and rattled like an old truck on a bumpy road. Come on, Jake said through his teeth. He had been flying for 8 years, but he had never seen damage this bad. The ship's computer kept making loud, beeping sounds that hurt his ears below him. The planet Kepler 442b looked like a giant brown and purple marble. It was not a friendly place. The air was thick with strange gases, and the temperature could kill a human in minutes without a proper suit. Worse than that, it belonged to the Zephyrians. Jake's radio crackled with static. He tried to call for help, but only heard broken voices from far away. His ship was falling fast now, and he could see the rocky ground getting bigger and bigger through his front window. The crash was not as bad as Jake thought it would be. His ship hit the ground hard and slid across the rocks for what felt like forever. When it finally stopped, Jake's head was spinning and his left arm hurt badly. But he was alive. Jake unbuckled his safety belt and looked around. The front of his ship was completely destroyed. Pieces of metal and plastic were scattered everywhere. A thin blue liquid that smelled terrible was leaking from somewhere behind him. He grabbed his emergency pack and checked his equipment. His plasma pistol still worked. His water supply was good for 3 days. His breathing mask was cracked but not broken. The radio was dead. Jake pushed open the twisted door and stepped outside. The air felt thick and heavy, even through his breathing mask. The sky was an ugly yellow color, and 2 small moons hung low on the horizon. Everything looked dead and empty. He knew the Zephyrians would find him soon. They had sensors all over this planet, and a ship crash would show up on their screens like a bright light in the dark. Jake needed to find somewhere to hide, but the landscape was mostly flat rocks and strange purple plants that looked like giant mushrooms. Jake started walking toward what looked like a group of tall rocks about 2 miles away. His left arm still hurt, and his head felt fuzzy, but he kept moving. Every few minutes he would stop and listen for aircraft engines or ground vehicles. After an hour of walking, Jake heard the low hum of flying machines. He dropped to the ground behind a large boulder and looked up. 3 Zephyrian scout ships moved across the sky in perfect formation. They were sleek and silver, shaped like teardrops with no visible wings. Jake had seen them before in battle, but never this close. The ships circled the area where his vessel had crashed. One of them landed near the wreckage, while the other 2 kept flying in wide circles. Jake watched through a small pair of binoculars as alien soldiers climbed out of the landed ship. Zephyrians were tall and thin, with purple skin that looked like it was covered in small scales. They had 4 arms and moved in a way that reminded Jake of spiders. Their heads were larger than human heads, with big black eyes and no visible nose or mouth. Each soldier wore white armor that seemed to glow in the strange yellow sunlight. Jake counted 6 soldiers examining his crashed ship. They moved carefully and methodically, checking every piece of wreckage. One of them held a device that beeped and flashed as it scanned the area. Jake knew it was looking for his trail. He needed to move, but the open ground between his hiding spot and the next group of rocks was too far. If he tried to run, they would see him for sure. Jake decided to wait and hope they would give up the search, but the Zephyrians were not giving up. More ships arrived, and soon there were 20 soldiers on the ground. They spread out in a perfect line and began walking slowly toward Jake's position. Their scanning devices were getting louder. Jake's heart was beating fast. He checked his plasma pistol and made sure it was set to full power. He might be able to take down 3 or 4 of them, but not 20. Still, he was not going to surrender. Without a fight, the lead Zephyrian soldier was now only 50 yards away. Jake could see that this one was different from the others. Its armor was gold instead of white, and it carried a larger weapon. Jake guessed this was their commander. The commander stopped and said something in the Zephyrian language. It sounded like a series of clicks and whistles. The other soldiers immediately changed their formation, spreading out in a wider circle. They knew exactly where Jake was hiding. Jake made his decision. He jumped up from behind the boulder and fired his plasma pistol at the nearest soldier. The bright blue energy beam hit the alien in the chest, and it fell backwards onto the rocks. But before Jake could fire again, something hit him in the back. The pain was incredible. Every muscle in Jake's body locked up, and he fell to the ground. Like a stone. He could not move or speak, but he could still see and hear everything around him. It was some kind of paralysis weapon. The gold-armored commander walked over to where Jake lay frozen on the ground. It looked down at him with those big black eyes and made more clicking sounds. Jake realized it was probably laughing. 2 soldiers picked Jake up and carried him toward their ship. He tried to fight, but his body would not obey his commands. All he could do was watch as they loaded him into the aircraft like a piece of cargo. Inside the Zephyrian ship, everything was white and clean. The walls curved in strange ways, and the lights were too bright. The soldiers strapped Jake into a chair that felt like it was made for someone with a different body shape. The commander sat across from Jake and stared at him for a long time. Finally, it spoke in perfect English. "You are Lieutenant Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Corps. Your ship's identification was USS Ranger, registry number 7-7-4-9. Jake was surprised that the alien could speak his language so well. Its voice was strange, like it was coming from underwater, but every word was clear. "We have been watching your people for some time," the commander continued. "You humans are interesting. Your military tactics make no sense, yet you continue to cause problems for our forces." The paralysis was starting to wear off. Jake could move his fingers a little, but he kept still and pretended to be completely helpless. "I am Commander Vexara of the 5th Assault Fleet," the alien said. "You will be taken to our base for questioning. Do not attempt to escape. It would be pointless and would only result in unnecessary pain." Jake finally found his voice. "Go to hell," he said quietly. Commander Vexara made that clicking sound again. "Your species is known for this kind of defiance. It is foolish, but admirable in its own way. You will have time to reconsider your attitude." The ship's engines grew louder, and Jake felt the aircraft lifting off the ground. Through a small window, he watched the crash site disappear below. He was now a prisoner of the Zephyrian Empire, flying toward an unknown fate on a hostile alien world. But Jake Morrison was not finished fighting, not yet. The Zephyrian base looked like a giant metal spider sitting on the planet's surface. Its long legs stretched out in all directions, each one ending in a tower filled with weapons and sensors. Jake could see the base getting bigger as their ship approached the landing pad. The aircraft touched down with barely a sound. Jake had to admit the Zephyrians knew how to build things. Everything was smooth and quiet, like they had taken all the rough edges out of the world. 2 guards escorted Jake off the ship. The paralysis weapon had worn off completely, but Jake pretended to be weaker than he really was. It was better to let the aliens think he was not dangerous. The inside of the base was just like the ship. White walls, bright lights, and everything perfectly clean. Jake's boots made loud sounds on the metal floor while the Zephyrian soldiers moved without making any noise at all. They walked down a long hallway past many doors. Through some of the open doorways, Jake could see alien soldiers working at computer stations. Everything looked organized and efficient. There was no wasted movement, no unnecessary talking. It reminded Jake of a hospital more than a military base. The guards stopped at a heavy door marked with alien symbols. One of them pressed his hand against a scanner, and the door slid open. Inside was a small room with a table, 2 chairs, and nothing else. The walls were bare metal, and there were no windows. "Sit," one of the guards said in English. His voice was even stranger than Commander Vexara's, like he was talking through water and gravel at the same time. Jake sat down in the chair facing the door. The guards left him alone and locked the door behind them. Jake immediately started examining the room, looking for anything he could use as a weapon or a way to escape. The table was bolted to the floor. The chairs were too light to do much damage. There were no loose screws or pieces of metal anywhere. Even the light fixtures were built into the ceiling where he could not reach them. Jake was still looking around when the door opened again. A human woman walked in, followed by 2 Zephyrian guards. Jake was so surprised he almost fell out of his chair. The woman was about 30 years old with brown hair and tired eyes. She wore a gray jumpsuit that looked like a prisoner's uniform. Her hands were not bound, but Jake could see she was scared. "Hello," she said quietly. "I'm Dr. Lisa Carter." "I'm from Earth too." Jake stood up quickly. "How long have you been here?" 3 months, Lisa said. She sat down in the other chair and looked at the guards. They said something in their clicking language and left the room, but Jake was sure they were still listening. "What happened to you?" Jake asked. "How did they capture you?" Lisa's voice was very quiet. "I was part of a science team studying the outer planets. We thought this system was empty, but the Zephyrians found us. They killed the rest of my team, but they kept me alive. Why? Because I'm a xenobiologist. I study alien life forms. They want me to help them understand humans." Lisa looked down at her hands. "They want to know how we think, how our bodies work, what makes us different from other species they've conquered." Jake felt anger building in his chest. "And you're helping them?" Lisa looked up at him with sad eyes. "They said they would kill me if I didn't cooperate. But I've been giving them false information whenever I can. I tell them things that aren't true, or I leave out important details." "What kind of things?" "Medical information mostly. How human organs work, what diseases we can get, what chemicals might hurt us." Lisa's voice got even quieter. "I think they're trying to develop biological weapons." Jake's anger turned cold. The idea of aliens using diseases against Earth made him sick. "We have to get out of here." "I've tried," Lisa said. "The security is too good. There are guards everywhere, and all the doors are locked with scanners that only work for Zephyrian hands. Even if we could get out of this room, we'd never make it off the base." The door opened again, and Commander Vexara walked in. She was even taller than Jake remembered, and her gold armor seemed to glow under the bright lights. Behind her came 2 more guards carrying strange devices that looked like a combination of computers and medical equipment. "Dr. Carter, you may leave," Vexara said. "I need to speak with our new prisoner alone." Lisa stood up slowly. As she walked past Jake, she whispered, "Be careful. She's smarter than she looks." When Lisa was gone, Vexara sat down across from Jake. She placed one of her devices on the table and pressed several buttons. The machine started making soft beeping sounds. "This device will tell me if you are lying," Vexara said. "It reads your body's reactions to questions, your heart rate, your breathing, the temperature of your skin. Humans are very bad at controlling these things." Jake tried to keep his face blank. "I'm not telling you anything. We shall see." Vexara touched the device again. "What is your rank and unit?" "Lieutenant Jake Morrison, Earth Defense Corps, that's all you get." The machine made a soft chime sound. Vexara looked at it and made that clicking noise that Jake thought was laughter. "The machine says you are telling the truth about your name and rank, but you are lying about something else. What are you hiding?" Jake said nothing. Vexara waited for a long time, then asked another question. "How many ships does Earth have in this sector?" "I don't know." The machine made a different sound, like a buzzer. Vexara's big black eyes seemed to get bigger. "That is a lie. You are a reconnaissance pilot. You would know the positions of other Earth ships?" Jake still said nothing. The questioning went on for an hour. Vexara asked about troop numbers, weapon types, base locations, and battle plans. Jake either refused to answer or gave false information. Each time, the machine told Vexara whether he was lying or not. Finally, Vexara turned off the device and leaned back in her chair. "You are very stubborn, Lieutenant Morrison, but also very interesting. Glad I can entertain you." "Your species fascinates me," Vexara continued. "We have conquered 47 worlds. Most species surrender when they see our superior technology. Others fight bravely but follow predictable patterns. We can calculate their moves and defeat them easily." Jake waited for her to continue. "But humans are different. Your tactics make no logical sense. You attack when you should retreat. You retreat when you should attack. You use weapons in ways they were not designed for. You break every rule of warfare, yet somehow you keep winning battles you should lose. Maybe we're just lucky, Jake said. No, luck does not explain 3 years of conflict. There's something else. Something about the way human minds work that our strategists cannot understand. Vexara stood up and walked around the table. She stopped behind Jake's chair and put one of her 4 hands on his shoulder. Her touch was cold, even through his uniform. I have lost many soldiers fighting your people, she said. Good soldiers who followed orders and used proper tactics. They died because humans do not fight the way the textbooks say they should fight. Jake could hear real emotion in her voice now. It was still strange and underwater sounding, but he could tell she was angry and frustrated. Dr. Carter has been helpful in understanding human biology, Vexara continued. But biology is not the answer. I need to understand human psychology. The way you think. The way you make decisions in battle. She walked back around the table and sat down again. You are going to help me with this. Like hell I am. You will help me or Dr. Carter will be executed, publicly as an example to other humans who might be captured. Jake felt his stomach drop. He looked at Vexara's face, trying to see if she was bluffing. But those alien features were impossible to read. What do you want from me? I want you to explain human military thinking. Why do your people make the choices they make in battle? What drives you to fight when logic says you should surrender? Jake thought about this for a long time. Finally, he said, You really want to know? Yes. Then you're going to have to do better than threats. If you want me to talk, you're going to have to give me something in return. Vexara made that clicking sound again. What do you want? I want to see Dr. Carter every day. I want to make sure she's okay. And I want better food than whatever slop you've been feeding her. Agreed. But if you lie to me or try to deceive me, the deal is off. Jake nodded. Fair enough. But Commander, I should warn you about something. What? Understanding how humans think might not help you as much as you hope. In fact, it might make your problem worse. Vexara's eyes seemed to narrow. Explain. Jake smiled for the first time since his capture. The thing about humans is that once we understand something, we immediately start looking for ways to break it. Jake's cell was small but clean, like everything else in the Zephyrian base. He had a narrow bed, a table, and a chair. There was even a small bathroom with running water. The food was strange but not terrible. It tasted like chicken mixed with metal, but it kept him alive. Every morning, 2 guards would come to take him to the interrogation room. Commander Vexara would be waiting with her questions and her lie-detecting machine. But these sessions were different from the first day. Instead of asking about military secrets, she wanted to understand how humans thought about war. On the 3rd day, Vexara asked Jake about the Battle of Titan Station. It was a fight that happened 6 months ago, where a small group of human ships had defeated a much larger Zephyrian fleet. Your Admiral Peterson had only 12 ships, Vexara said. My fleet had 37. Our ships were bigger and had better weapons. By all calculations, we should have won easily. Jake remembered hearing about the battle on the news. But you didn't win. No, your admiral did something that made no sense. When our main fleet moved to attack his center, he split his forces into 3 groups and attacked from different directions at the same time. This violated every rule of space combat. Why? Vexara's 4 hands moved in the air as she tried to explain. When you are outnumbered, you should concentrate your forces. Attack the enemy's weakest point with everything you have. Peterson's strategy was suicide. He made his small fleet even smaller. Jake smiled. But it worked. Yes, it worked. Our commanders became confused. They had prepared for a traditional battle, but Peterson gave them chaos instead. While they were trying to reorganize, your ships destroyed 6 of ours and escaped. Sounds like good tactics to me. That is what I do not understand, Vexara said. She leaned forward in her chair. How did Peterson know this would work? What calculations did he use? What strategy book taught him this method? Jake thought about how to answer. He wanted to help Lisa. But he also did not want to give the aliens information they could use against Earth. There was no strategy book, Jake said finally. Peterson probably made it up on the spot. The lie detector machine stayed quiet, which meant Jake was telling the truth. Vexara looked confused. Made it up? During a battle? That is impossible. Military operations require careful planning and precise execution. Not always. Sometimes you have to improvise. Improvise? Jake realized that Vexara did not understand the word. It means to make up a solution when you don't have a plan. To do something new when the old ways don't work. Vexara was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "This is why we cannot predict human tactics. Your people change their methods in the middle of battle. Sometimes, yeah. But how do you coordinate your forces if there is no plan? How do you make sure everyone knows what to do?" Jake shrugged. "We figure it out as we go." That afternoon, Jake was allowed to visit with Lisa in a common room. There were other prisoners there too, but they were all aliens from species that the Zephyrians had conquered years ago. Jake and Lisa were the only humans. "How are the interrogations going?" Lisa asked quietly. "Strange," Jake said. "She's not asking for military secrets anymore. She wants to understand how we think." Be careful. The more she learns about us, the more dangerous she becomes. Jake looked around the room. The other prisoners sat quietly by themselves, not talking to anyone. They looked defeated and hopeless. "How long have these others been here?" Jake asked. "Some of them for years. The Zephyrians keep them as examples of conquered species. They study them to understand how different alien minds work." "What happened to their homeworlds?" Lisa's voice became very sad. "Gone. The Zephyrians don't usually destroy planets, but they take them over completely. They remove the native populations and replace them with their own colonies." Jake felt sick. "How many planets have they taken?" 47, according to Vexara. Earth would be number 48. That evening, Jake lay on his bed thinking about his conversation with Vexara. He was starting to understand something important about the Zephyrians. They were incredibly smart and organized, but they thought about war like it was a math problem. They believed that if you had better weapons and more ships, you would always win. But humans did not think that way. Jake remembered his training at the military academy. His instructors had taught him that war was unpredictable and messy. The best plans usually failed within the first few minutes of battle. Success came from being able to adapt and change when things went wrong the next day. Vexara came to his cell instead of taking him to the interrogation room. She looked different. Her usually perfect armor was slightly dirty, and she seemed tired. "I have been studying recordings of human battles," she said. "I watched your people fight the Kralix Empire 12 years ago. The humans were outnumbered. 10-1, yet you won." Jake nodded. He had been just a kid during the Kralix War, but everyone on Earth knew the story. "The Kralix had better technology than the Zephyrians," Vexara continued. "Their ships could destroy a human vessel with a single shot, but humans kept fighting anyway. Even when defeat was certain. We're stubborn that way." "No, it is more than stubbornness. I watched a recording of the Battle of New Chicago. A human captain named Rodriguez flew his damaged ship directly into a Kralix dreadnought. The explosion destroyed both vessels." Jake remembered that story too. Captain Rodriguez had saved thousands of lives with that sacrifice. "The Kralix could not understand why he would do this," Vexara said. "In their culture, self-preservation is the highest value. They could not imagine someone choosing death to save others. Rodriguez was a hero." "Yes, but that is my point. Zephyrian warriors are brave, but we fight to win battles and return home alive. We do not seek glorious death." Vexara sat down on Jake's bed. It was strange to see the alien commander in such a casual position. "I am beginning to understand why my people cannot defeat yours," she said. "We prepare for logical enemies who want to survive, but humans are not logical. You will die to protect strangers. You will sacrifice victory to save a single life. You will fight hopeless battles just because you refuse to surrender." Jake thought about this. Is that bad? From a military standpoint, yes. It makes you inefficient and unpredictable, but Vexara paused. It also makes you very dangerous. An enemy who is willing to die is much harder to defeat than one who wants to live. Over the next several days, their conversations continued. Vexara would ask questions about human history, and Jake would try to explain without giving away anything useful for attacking Earth. He told her about the American Revolution, where farmers with old rifles defeated the most powerful army in the world. He explained how the Vietnamese had fought off much larger and better equipped forces through determination and unconventional tactics. He described how humans had survived ice ages, plagues, and natural disasters by refusing to give up. Your species has been fighting impossible battles for thousands of years, Vexara said during one session, and you keep winning. Not always. We lose plenty of fights. But even when you lose, you learn from it. And then you come back stronger, Jake nodded. That's what humans do. We don't stay down. Vexara was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said something that surprised Jake. I think my people made a mistake when we decided to invade Earth. What do you mean? The other species we conquered were advanced but predictable. They had logical weaknesses we could exploit, but humans ... She made that clicking sound that Jake now knew meant frustration. You have no logical weaknesses. Your greatest weakness is also your greatest strength. Which is? You never know. When to quit, Jake smiled. Is that really such a bad thing? Vexara looked at him with those big black eyes. For my people, it may be the end of everything. That night, Jake could not sleep. He kept thinking about what Vexara had said. She was starting to understand humans, but that understanding was making her doubt her own people's chances of winning the war. This gave Jake an idea. Maybe he could use Vexara's curiosity against the Zephyrians. If he could make her see that humans would never surrender. Maybe she would convince her leaders to stop the invasion, but first, he needed to find a way to escape with Lisa, and that meant learning more about Zephyrian weaknesses. Jake had noticed something interesting during his time as a prisoner. The Zephyrians followed rules and procedures for everything. They never deviated from their training or protocols. Even their conversations followed predictable patterns. This rigid thinking was their strength in many ways. It made them organized and efficient. But Jake was starting to think it might also be their weakness. If he could find a way to create a situation that their training had not prepared them for, maybe he could catch them off guard. The key was to do something so unexpected that their logical minds would not know how to respond. Jake smiled in the darkness of his cell. He was starting to form a plan. Jake had been a prisoner for 2 weeks when Lisa brought him terrible news. They were sitting in the common room, pretending to play a board game while they talked quietly. I overheard 2 scientists talking, Lisa whispered. They're almost finished with their biological weapon project. Jake felt his blood turn cold. What kind of weapon? A virus that only affects humans. It attacks the nervous system. The person gets sick slowly over several weeks, but by the time symptoms show up, they've already infected dozens of other people. Jake's hands tightened around the game pieces. How close are they to finishing it? Maybe a week. 2 weeks at most. Lisa's voice was shaking. Jake, if they deploy this thing on Earth, millions of people will die. We have to stop them. How? We're prisoners on an alien base surrounded by guards with advanced weapons. Jake looked around the room. The other alien prisoners were sitting quietly, as always. They had given up hope long ago, but Jake was not ready to give up. Tell me about the base layout, Jake said. You've been here longer than me. What have you seen? Lisa thought for a moment. The main laboratory is on level 3, near the center of the base. That's where they're developing the virus. The armory is on level 2. The command center is at the top of the central tower. What about the power systems? There's a main reactor core on the lowest level, but Jake, the security is incredible. Every door requires a hand scan, and there are guards everywhere. Jake moved one of his game pieces randomly. What about the ventilation system? Too small for humans to crawl through. I already thought of that. Emergency procedures? What happens if there's a fire or an explosion? Lisa looked at him carefully. All the doors unlock automatically and everyone evacuates to the landing pads. But Jake, you're not thinking of starting a fire, are you? This whole base is full of dangerous chemicals and weapons. An explosion could kill everyone, including us. Jake was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, maybe that's a risk we have to take. You're crazy. Maybe, but I'd rather die trying to stop that virus than sit here and wait for them to kill my entire species. That night, Jake lay in his bed making plans. He had noticed something during his daily walks to the interrogation room. The guards always took the same route through the same corridors. They followed exact procedures for everything, including security patrols. The Zephyrians changed shifts every 8 hours, and for exactly 3 minutes during each shift change, certain corridors were empty. It was not much time, but it might be enough. Jake also remembered something Vexara had told him about Zephyrian psychology. They valued order and efficiency above everything else. They did not expect chaos or unpredictable behavior. If Jake could create enough confusion, maybe the guards would not know how to respond quickly enough. The next morning, Jake asked Vexara about Zephyrian emergency procedures. Why do you want to know this? She asked suspiciously. I'm curious about how your people handle disasters. Humans have fire drills and evacuation plans. Do Zephyrians do the same thing? Vexara relaxed. Of course. We are very thorough in our preparations. If there is any danger to the base, all personnel evacuate according to strict protocols. What kind of dangers? Fire, structural damage, radiation leaks, toxic gas releases. Each situation has its own procedure, Jake nodded. What about explosions? Explosions are treated as the highest priority emergency. All doors unlock immediately, and everyone must reach the landing pads within 4 minutes. 4 minutes? That seems very fast. It has to be fast. If something explodes in a military base, the damage can spread quickly. Speed is more important than order during an evacuation. Jake filed this information away. 4 minutes was not much time, but it might be enough if he and Lisa could move quickly. 3 days later, Jake put his plan into action. During his afternoon visit with Lisa, he told her what they were going to do. You want us to break into the armory? Lisa said. Jake, that's suicide. Maybe, but it's our only chance to get weapons. Without weapons, we can't fight our way out of here. And how exactly do we get into the armory? The door is locked with a hand scanner. Jake smiled. That's where Zephyrian efficiency works against. I've been watching the guards. They do everything the same way every time. During the shift change at 6 o'clock, guard post 7 is empty for exactly 3 minutes. 3 minutes isn't enough time to break into the armory. We don't need to break in. We just need to wait for the right guard to come by, Jake explained his plan. It was risky and depended on perfect timing, but it was the best chance they were going to get at 5:50 in the evening. Jake pretended to be sick. He called for the guards and collapsed on his cell floor, making choking sounds. 2 guards came running. While they were trying to figure out what was wrong with Jake, Lisa used an improvised lockpick she had made from a piece of metal to slip out of her cell. She had been working on the lock for weeks, making tiny scratches that the guards never noticed. Jake suddenly jumped up and grabbed one of the guards. He was not trying to fight them, just create confusion and noise. The other guard immediately called for help on his radio. In the chaos that followed, Lisa made her way through the corridors toward the armory. She moved quickly but carefully, avoiding the main hallways where more guards would be patrolling. Meanwhile, Jake let the guards capture him again. They were angry and confused, but they did not realize that Lisa was missing. In the excitement, no one had thought to check her cell. Lisa reached the armory just as guard post 7 emptied for the shift change. She hid behind a supply crate and waited. Exactly 2 minutes later, a single guard approached the armory door. Lisa had learned something important during her 3 months as a prisoner. Zephyrian soldiers were trained to follow procedures, but they were not trained to expect the unexpected. When Lisa jumped out and yelled, "Help me, please!" The guard's first instinct was to try to understand what was happening rather than to attack. That moment of confusion was all Lisa needed. She grabbed a metal pipe from the supply crate and hit the guard in the head. The alien fell down, unconscious. But not seriously hurt, Lisa pressed the guard's hand against the door scanner. The armory door slid open, revealing rows of advanced Zephyrian weapons. She grabbed 2 plasma rifles and as much ammunition as she could carry. Getting back to Jake was harder. The base was now on alert because of Jake's fake medical emergency. There were guards everywhere, and they were starting to realize that something was wrong. Lisa had to hide in storage rooms and maintenance closets as patrols walked by. Twice she almost got caught, but each time she managed to stay hidden until the guards passed. She finally reached Jake's cell 20 minutes later. The guards had left him alone after deciding that his sickness was not serious. Jake was sitting on his bed, pretending to be weak and tired. "Did you get them?" Jake whispered. Lisa showed him the plasma rifles she had hidden under her jumpsuit. 2 rifles and enough power cells for about 50 shots each. Perfect. Now we need to get to the laboratory and destroy that virus. How? The laboratory is 3 levels up and probably full of scientists and guards. Jake stood up and checked his weapon. The Zephyrian plasma rifle was heavier than human weapons, but it felt solid and well made. We're going to create a distraction. Something big enough to draw all the guards away from the laboratory. What kind of distraction? Remember what Vexara told me about evacuation procedures? If there's an explosion, everyone has to evacuate within 4 minutes. Lisa's eyes got wide. You want to blow something up? Not something big enough to destroy the whole base. Just enough to trigger the emergency evacuation. While everyone is running for the landing pads, we go to the laboratory and destroy the virus samples. And then what? Even if we destroy the virus, we're still trapped on an alien planet. Jake smiled grimly. Then we improvise. It's what humans do best. Lisa took a deep breath. Okay, I'm with you. But if we're going to do this, we need to do it right. What exactly are we going to blow up? Jake had already thought about this. The power junction on level 2. It's not critical to the base's main systems, but it controls the lights and air circulation for the upper levels. If it explodes, it will look like a major emergency. How do we make it explode? Plasma rifles. Have an overload setting? If we set one to overload and place it next to the power junction, it should create a big enough explosion to trigger the evacuation. They spent the next hour going over the plan. It was dangerous and complicated, with too many things that could go wrong, but it was their only chance to stop the biological weapon and maybe escape. As they prepared to leave Jake's cell, Lisa grabbed his arm. Jake, if this doesn't work, I want you to know that I'm glad I met you. For 3 months, I thought I was going to die alone on this horrible planet. At least now I have a friend with me. Jake squeezed her hand. We're not going to die, Lisa. We're going to stop that virus, get off this planet, and go home. How can you be so sure? Jake grinned. Because we're human, and humans don't know when to quit. Veltar stared at Jake with confusion in her purple eyes. She looked down at her plasma weapon and checked it quickly. The weapon was ready to fire. There was no safety switch on Zephyrian weapons like the human had said. Her people had moved past such simple mechanical devices hundreds of years ago. Their weapons were controlled by thought and energy, not crude switches and buttons, but something in the human's voice made her pause. He spoke with such confidence, such certainty. It was not the voice of a man about to die. It was the voice of someone who knew something she did not. That moment of doubt was all Jake needed. His hands, still bound behind his back, moved in a pattern he had practiced thousands of times. 3 quick finger movements, a specific sequence that sent a signal to a tiny device hidden in his belt. The Zephyrians had taken his weapons, but they had not bothered to search him properly. Why would they? He was just a primitive human with primitive technology. The signal traveled to his M45 pistol sitting on the weapon rack across the room. The gun looked harmless enough to the aliens. Just another crude human tool that threw metal pieces instead of elegant energy beams. They had placed it with the other captured equipment without a second thought. Jake had modified that pistol years ago during his first tour of duty. A small device connected to the trigger mechanism could fire the weapon remotely. It was a desperate measure for desperate times. He had never thought he would actually use it. The pistol fired with a loud crack that echoed through the command post. The metal bullet struck the main power coupling that fed energy to all the Zephyrian equipment. Sparks flew in every direction as the coupling exploded. The aliens had built their technology to handle energy weapons and plasma attacks. Their systems were designed to absorb and redirect energy, but they had never planned for a simple chunk of metal traveling at high speed. The bullet punched through their advanced materials. Like they were made of paper, the explosion sent feedback through every connected system. Lights flickered and died. Screens went dark. The elegant curved walls that had been glowing with soft blue light suddenly looked cold and dead. Emergency power kicked in, but it was weak and unstable. Veltar stumbled backward as her weapon's energy chamber overloaded. The feedback from the destroyed coupling traveled through the wireless connection to her plasma gun. The weapon became too hot to hold, and she dropped it with a cry of pain. Around the room, her soldiers faced the same problem. Their advanced weapons were suddenly useless pieces of heated metal. The energy restraints holding Jake's hands shut down with the rest of the systems. He flexed his wrists and felt the bonds fall away. Years of combat training took over. He rolled to his right just as one of the Zephyrian soldiers tried to grab him in the dim. Emergency lighting. Jake had spent his whole military career fighting in situations where technology failed. Human soldiers learned to fight with broken equipment, dead batteries, and damaged systems. They trained in the dark and the cold in conditions where their gear might not work. The Zephyrians had never learned such skills. They had always relied on their perfect technology. Now that technology was failing them, Jake moved through the darkened room like a shadow. The emergency lights cast strange shadows that confused the aliens even more. Their large eyes were designed to see in different light spectrums than humans. The red emergency lighting that seemed normal to Jake was almost blinding to them. One soldier stumbled past him, reaching for a backup weapon. Jake grabbed the alien's arm and used his momentum to throw him into a wall. The Zephyrian hit hard and slumped to the floor, dazed. Another soldier tried to tackle Jake from behind. Jake heard him coming and dropped low, sweeping the alien's legs. The soldier fell forward and Jake caught him, using a sleeper hold he had learned in basic training. The alien struggled for a few seconds, then went limp. Veltar was shouting orders in her own language, trying to coordinate her remaining soldiers. But they could not see properly in the emergency lighting and their communication systems were down. They stumbled around the room like blind creatures, bumping into equipment and each other. Jake reached the weapons rack and grabbed his pistol. The metal was still warm from firing, but it worked perfectly. He also picked up Veltar's dropped plasma weapon. The alien gun was cooling down now that the power surge had ended. He could feel it becoming usable again. "Nobody move," Jake said loudly. His voice cut through the confusion and everyone froze. "I have weapons pointed at all of you." Veltar turned toward his voice. She could barely see him in the red lighting, but she could hear the confidence in his words. "This is impossible," she said. "You are one human against 6 trained soldiers." "5 soldiers," Jake corrected. "2 of yours are unconscious, and you're not soldiers right now. You're people with broken equipment who can't see properly." He moved to a better position where he could watch all of them. The emergency lighting was actually helping him now. He knew where everyone was, but they could not track his movements. "Your weapons will work again soon," Jake continued. "But not soon enough. Here's what's going to happen. You're all going to sit down on the floor with your hands visible. Anyone who tries to be a hero gets shot with their own plasma technology." One of the soldiers muttered something in the Zephyrian language. Veltar snapped back at him in the same tongue. Jake could not understand the words, but the tone was clear. The soldier was suggesting they rush him. Veltar was telling him to be quiet. "Smart choice," Jake said to Veltar. "You're finally learning to think like a human." When you don't have advantages, you don't take stupid risks. The aliens slowly sat down as instructed. Jake kept both weapons ready, switching his aim between them. The emergency power was getting stronger and more systems were coming back online. Soon their equipment would be working again. You studied human weapons, Jake said as he worked, but you never understood them. You think our guns are primitive because they use metal bullets instead of energy, but those bullets don't need power sources. They don't have computer chips. That can be overloaded. They work in any environment, any weather, any situation. He found a working communication device among the recovered equipment and started sending a distress signal. His backup team should be able to track it now. We also learned something your people never did, Jake continued. We learned to fight when our technology fails. Every human soldier trains for equipment failure. We practice fighting in the dark with broken gear, with dead batteries. Because we know that in a real fight, something always goes wrong. Veltar watched him with new understanding in her eyes. You planned this, she said. The remote trigger, the power coupling, all of it, Jake shook his head. I planned for the possibility. There's a difference. Humans always have backup plans because we assume things will go wrong. You assume things would go right because your technology is so good. The main lights flickered and came back on. The Zephyrian weapons would be working again soon. But Jake now had control of the situation and backup on the way. The aliens remained sitting on the floor, unwilling to test whether he would really shoot them. Your people made one big mistake, Jake told Veltar. You thought predictable meant stupid. Humans might be predictable in some ways, but we're also adaptable. When the situation changes, we change with it. 20 minutes later, Jake's backup team burst through the command post entrance. They found him sitting calmly with 5 prisoners and 2 unconscious aliens. All the Zephyrian equipment had been disabled and their intelligence files had been copied to human storage devices. Lieutenant Ben Parker, Jake's second-in-command, looked around the destroyed command post with amazement. How did you manage all this, Captain? Jake checked the safety on his M45 pistol and holstered it. I reminded them that sometimes the old ways work best. As the prisoners were being secured, Veltar looked at Jake one last time. We will study this engagement, she said. We will learn from our mistakes, Jake nodded. Good, maybe next time. You'll remember that underestimating humans is dangerous for your health. The mining colony was saved. The Zephyrian attack plans were compromised, and somewhere in the galaxy, alien military commanders would have to rethink everything they thought they knew about fighting humans, because humans had just proven once again that when you back them into a corner, they don't just fight back. They find ways to win that nobody saw coming.